Yo, what's going on guys? It's C-Brev. Welcome back to another MLB The Show 23 video. The XP reward path is back in MLB The Show 23, which means there's tons of rewards and diamond cards that we can earn just from playing the game. In this video, I'm going to be going through every choice pack that you can earn through this XP reward path and giving my advice and opinions on who you should take. As always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get right into it. Wanted to touch briefly on this captain's pack. You do actually get all four of these cards, so there's no choice to be had, but I did just want to mention that Bryce Harper is a pretty decent budget DH option. He's got 101, 106 versus righties and really good quirks too, so if you're looking for just like a DH to throw in your lineup as you're just starting to build your team, that's definitely an option. And same goes for Ryan Pressly. Ryan Pressly is actually a pretty good bullpen arm as well, and bullpen arms are pretty hard to come by in this game, so this is a really solid option too that's probably going to be sticking around in a lot of people's rosters. Alright, the first major choice pack you come across in the XP reward path is the Charisma pack. There are 797 overall cards in this one, and if you max out the XP reward path, you're going to end up with 4 of them. Starting off first with Curtis Granderson, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated cards in the entire game right now. As I've said in several other videos, the pitching is really right-handed heavy right now, so hitting stats versus righties is super important, and this is actually a really good card that you just get from grinding XP. 110, 103 versus righties, gold defense anywhere in the outfield, and 81 speed. He's also got really good quirks, including dead red and pinch hitter. Overall, I think this is potentially the best budget outfielder in the entire game right now, and a must get from this pack. Next up is Lee Smith, who is another pretty much mandatory pickup from this pack. As I mentioned earlier, bullpen arms are pretty hard to come by, and it may be even more difficult to fill out an entire bullpen in the sets and season structure. It remains to be seen, but this is one of the best bullpen arms in the entire game right now. Lee Smith has always had an amazing pitch mix. His cards have always played really well, and for some reason, specifically with his pitch motion, it seems like his forkball comes in so slow. Also has perfect speed differential between four-seam, cutter, and slider. I'm a huge fan of the card. The one kind of downside of it is only 95 hits per 9, but otherwise across the board, this card is really good and a no-brainer out of this pack. Cooling off a bit here with Troy Glaus. Unfortunately for Troy Glaus, third base is a position that's absolutely stacked right now. There are tons of other and better options that you can play at third base in my opinion. The shortstop secondary is pretty interesting, although I don't know how well he's actually going to play there with 57 speed. I just don't think that this card hits right-handed pitching well enough, and he's also 6'5". A lot of people mention that they struggle hitting with big strike zones. So this is just an okay card for me and a decent bench bat option if you're running a lefty at third base and shortstop at the same time. On to Johnny Bench now, another card that I think is just okay. In a left-handed pitching meta, this card would be insane, but unfortunately that's not where we're at right now. And 80-86 versus righties is just really low. I will say to his credit, they gave Johnny Bench a ton of quirks, including dead red and breaking ball hitter together. The secondary positions make this card a really intriguing bench bat too, especially since he's a primary catcher. Kinsuke Kondo, a left-handed catcher, is a really popular option right now, so this could be a great platoon slash bench option to complement that. Additionally, a lot of the corner infielders that are really good are left-handed too, so this is a guy that could be on your bench and cover a lot of positions. But overall, as a starting catcher, he's just alright. On to Madison Bumgarner now, who's a really interesting card. I imagine we're going to be seeing a lot of left-handed heavy lineups, and he's one of the few decent left-handed starting pitcher options, so he could end up becoming decently counter meta at some point. And also, as you're grinding up your team from scratch, especially if you're a no money spent player, starting pitching can be really hard to come by, and especially if you're not going to use the Buck O'Neil captain and use those NLB players in your rotation, then you are going to be starving for starting pitching. This is a good card that could end up being a mandatory pick for you depending on the state of your starting pitching and how badly you need options there. Next is Craig Biggio, who I'm a pretty big fan of. Basically, the only tool that he's missing is power. The lack of power may not end up affecting this card as much just because he does have both dead red and breaking ball hitter, which are going to be increasing exit velocities on basically every pitch. This is pretty close to a 5-tool player that can play second base, catcher, and the outfield. So overall, I'm a pretty big fan. This is a really good card. And finally, from the Charisma pack, we have Baltimore Orioles Eric Davis. This is another really solid card. There are a few things to note about him specifically though. Historically, people have not really liked Eric Davis's stance. It's because he holds the bat over the plate in a super weird way. So that's something to definitely consider. As far as his attributes go though, pretty good. good. Obviously, this is going to be an offensive-minded outfielder with the silver defense in right field, but he has decent speed to make up for it. This is a good card. I just think there's other good options in the outfield as well, even just in this XP reward path. Give him a shot if you want to, but he's not one of my recommended picks for this pack. Alright, so in summary, the first two cards you should be grabbing from this pack for sure are Lee Smith and Curtis Granderson. I'd probably go with Lee Smith first just to get the bullpen arm knocked out. After that, I'd go with Madison Bumgarner for my third pick if I needed the pitching. I think most people starting out building their squads and working through this XP reward path are gonna need the pitching, so that's why I recommend Bumgarner here. And then for your fourth and final pick, I would pick one of the two catchers, either Craig Biggio or Johnny Bench. I personally prefer Craig Biggio here. Alright, moving on to the next choice pack, which is a World Baseball Classic choice pack. This pack is the same structure as the Charisma one. There's 7 cards you can choose from, and you end up being able to pick 4 of them by the end of the path. And this pack's pretty loaded with good cards, so I'm excited to go through it. First is Johnny Cueto, who's just a really solid starting pitcher across the board. I would say this card is better than the Madison Bumgarner in the last pack. I'm not a huge fan of the lack of speed differential between his pitches, but 100 hits per 9 is pretty decent. 107 pitching clutch is going to be pulling that up with runners in scoring position. And myself and many others had tons of success with Johnny Cueto's in-game card last year. I think he's just a pitcher that a lot of people struggle to read online and can be pretty tough to hit against. And as I mentioned earlier, as you're grinding up your squad from scratch, you're going to be begging for starting pitching, so this is another solid option for you. Next is Robinson Cano, who is potentially the best non-99 card available in this XP reward path. Cannot stress to you enough how good this card is. This is a left-handed hitting primary second baseman who gets gold fielding. 114-91 versus righties, 98-96 versus lefties isn't even bad, and 115 clutch. So if you end up in a left-on-left situation with a runner in scoring position, it's going to be even better than 98-96. And historically, personal bias, I've always found Robinson Cano cards to be amazing. I just love his swing in the game. This card is absolutely a must pick for me out of this pack. It's so good. Next is Yoan Moncada, another really good card from this pack. Switch hitter. I love that he's got the second base secondary as well. Gives him some flexibility there. I don't think he's as good as Robinson Cano at second base, and I don't think he's as good at third base as the next guy we're going to talk about. So it puts this card in a bit of a weird spot in terms of this choice pack specifically. But don't get me wrong, this is an amazing card. Yoan Moncada, another really popular swing in the community. And if Robinson Cano's really not working, or you're really not enjoying your third baseman, or if you end up in a position where you're facing a lot of left-handed pitching, this card could overtake the others. Next is Freddie Freeman, who is a card that I am in love with. This is actually a really interesting card to talk about in terms of your choices throughout the whole game. Let's take a look at the attributes first though. Against righties, 117-87. Against lefties, 99-79. But again, if we look at that clutch, Freddie Freeman with maxed out clutch, 125. So he's going to be pulling your contact up no matter what, and against lefties it's going to be by a lot when you have runners in scoring position. This card is also absolutely loaded with quirks, both first pitch hitter and unfazed, both dead red and breaking ball hitter. And it brings up an interesting question because this card is so good, but he plays the 2 most stacked positions in the game right now. I think this card is a must pick if you're not planning on going through a huge team affinity grind to get all the cards. A typical God Squad team affinity based corner infield right now could look something like Jock Peterson at first and Rafael Devers at third. If you are not interested in going for those cards in TA, or if you just want to pick one or the other since they're in completely opposite divisions and regions, then I absolutely think Freddie Freeman could fill the void there. I don't know that he's better than Devers at third. I don't know that he's better than Jock at first. It's really close. But if you're not quite there yet on your team affinity grind, then I think this is a no-brainer pick out of this pack. So in regards to this card specifically, you're going to really have to think about long-term how you're going to build your team and what you want to spend your time grinding. Next is Teoscar Hernandez. Pretty decent card. Would be insane if there was more left-handed pitching in the game, but for right now, he's just okay. Silver defense, 83 speed and right, 95-90 versus righties. This card is close enough to Luis Robert that you get for free from the World Baseball Classic program that I probably wouldn't recommend taking him out of this pack. Next is Tim Anderson, pretty similar to Teoscar Hernandez, but just plays different positions. This is a pretty solid bench option. I just think there's better cards to start with, so this is just another okay card for me from this pack. And finally, out of this pack, we have Young-Hoo Lee, who I think is another incredibly underrated card in the game. Left-handed bat that plays the outfield anywhere with gold defense, pretty decent speed, and hits extremely well. One thing about this card that's a bit unfortunate is no quirks to speak of, but overall I'm a pretty big fan of this card. Alright, let's run through the pack one more time and go over who I think your choices should be. As an aside and reminder, these cards are all purchasable and sellable on the marketplace, so these choices are not necessarily end-all be-all. You can always buy and sell. But the first no-brainer pick for me from this pack would be Robinson Cano. Then after that, I would really take a look at your team needs. You could go with Johnny Cueto for some pitching. You could go with Freddie Freeman if you want a corner infielder and you're not really expecting to acquire some other really good corner infielders for a long time. Or you could go with Young-Hoo Lee to fill out your outfield a little bit better. But overall, those are my 4 choices from this pack. They are Cano, Cueto, Freeman, and Young-Hoo Lee, with Yoan Moncada in a close 5th. Alright, now we're finally on to the juicy stuff, which is the final boss pack. There are 5 cards in here and you get to pick 3 of them. And here's where our choices are going to start to become really important. Because these are 99s, these are some of the best cards in the game. And what I'm really going to be looking for out of these cards is longevity. So if I'm picking a 99 out of this pack, I want him on my team and producing for a really long time. So really that's going to be the most important thing that we're looking for, since all of these cards are extremely good and some of the best in the game. Let's start with a couple of easy ones. I think Devin Williams is a no-brainer pick. As I've talked about already multiple times, it's pretty hard to fill out your bullpen early in the year, and this is the best righty reliever in the game right now. Hard primary screwball with the 4-seam and cutter speed differential and maxed out per 9s. This is just a lockdown closer, and he's probably going to be in your bullpen all the way until set 3. So this card is the king of longevity and why I think he's a no-brainer pick out of this pack. Next is the other easy pick, but on the other end of the spectrum, Rickey Henderson. This might be kind of a hot take because this card is pretty much 5-tool. He gets to diamond defense at parallel 3 in left field if you want to get him there. But picking an outfielder is just a really tough sell for me right now because I know they're going to be putting out so many good ones from now until set 3. For example, we've already got Jim Edmonds in packs, who is as close if not better than this card, and who knows how many more outfielders they're going to put out in a similar fashion. I guess that's technically true for every position, but it really feels like there's outfielders galore all the time in this game. I will say though, Rickey's weakest tool is power, and he does have the same thing that I was talking about with Biggio with dead red and breaking ball hitters. So want to stress again, this is one of the best outfielders in the game and an extremely good card. I just don't think he's the right pick for most people out of this pack. Alright, now let's get into a bit of the tougher discussion with the last 3 cards. I'm going to talk about Francisco Lindor here, who is actually my number 2 pick out of this pack. I just think Francisco Lindor is a rock solid pick. He's going to be giving you a ton of longevity in the infield. He plays 3 positions. He's going to have diamond defense at all of them. He's a switch hitter with basically even splits. This card is just going to be great no matter what you do with him in any meta, in any situation. This card has essentially no weaknesses aside from the fact that his hitting stats are a bit low compared to some other options we have in the game. Also, if your end goal for set 1 is to work on the set collect, which I think most people will want to do, that set collect contains Jazz Chisholm and Trey Turner. I think that is the middle infield that most people are going to be shooting for by the end of set 1 if they can get there. But in the meantime, this card is going to hold up right up against those cards and be holding down those positions until you get them. And so you could be legitimately looking at a situation where Lindor is your shortstop slash second baseman until you get Jazz and Trey, and then you could just sell Lindor afterwards. Like I said, this card is just going to be an absolute rock in your roster, and that's why he's my number 2 pick for this pack. And so that leaves 2 cards with one more choice to make. We've got Bob Gibson and Munetaka Murakami left. This Bob Gibson is extremely good and one of the best pitchers in the game right now. 108 hits per 9 and 125 pitching clutch is insane. Also has outlier on the 4-seamer. This card is disgusting, but I also think he's probably not the pick for most people. In my opinion, it feels just a bit bad using a pick from this pack on a starting pitcher. 1, because they only play once every 5th game, and 2, because I know they're going to be pumping out starting pitchers a lot with the content. Kind of the same thing I was talking about with outfielders. If I'm taking a 99 out of this pack, I really want to feel his impact on my roster a lot of the time for a long time, and I just don't know if a starting pitcher does that. That's really the only reason he's not my choice here, is because he doesn't play that often, but as a card individually, this card is insanely good. And again, I think there's actual merit to be picking up all 5 of these cards if you can afford them, or if they end up really cheap at the end of the season. And finally, that leaves Munetaka Murakami, who is going to be my 3rd choice out of this pack. This card is just too good to pass up. Even though he plays the 2 most stacked positions in the game, I think he's one of the best at both. For me, he's the best first baseman in the game, not named Babe Ruth right now, and he's the best 3rd baseman in the game right now, not named Chipper Jones or Eddie Matthews. Max power with basically 110 contact to go with it, and gold defense at 3rd base. This card is just insanely good. And honestly, who knows if or when we'll ever be able to use this guy as a card in Diamond Dynasty again. So I'm just not gonna pass up on that opportunity, and the fun factor is through the roof on this card. I love all the World Baseball Classic guys that we got in the game. So that's gonna do it for the video. I hope that was helpful for you all. I know a lot of you have been already grinding your way through the XP reward path and probably have already made some choices, but hopefully this helps you guys out with the choices you have left to make. Appreciate you all watching. Thank you so much for the support. Take care, and I'll see y'all in the next video.